Crystal.
My name is Maria.
My name is Claude.
All right, Mr. Claude, you done? Okay. So let's start with you then. Read to us your 3 facts, and let's try to decide which one is not you.
I thought you said 2.
No, 2 truths and 1 lie.
Oh, okay, 1 more.
Yeah, 1 more.
And it doesn't matter what it is, right?
Mm-mm. Yeah. It's a beautiful day. We got playground action going on out there. Okay, 2 more seconds. All right, Crystal, why don't we start with you while you finish your research?
I love kids, I love driving, and I love skydiving.
Kids driving and skydiving. All right. So, what do you all think? What is not true?
She loves skydiving. I think that's not true.
You think that's not true? What do you think, Mr. Claude?
I know, I can tell she doesn't like to get in the air.
She don't like it in the air. All right, so 2 for skydiving. What's the truth? That's the truth?
Oh, the truth?
No,
the lie.
That's the
That's
lie.
the lie.
You do not like skydiving.
Yeah.
They're able to read you on that one. Okay, Miss Maria.
I'm a caring person, neglectful, and funny.
Neglectful? Of course.
No.
That's the
And you must be you're not funny. That must be.
She's not funny. No.
So neglectful is not the truth, right?
That's right.
Okay. Oh, good to know. All right, Mr. Clark.
Alright, I'm a loving father of many. I play soccer. I'm a great quarterback.
Quarterback.
I never get on the football field before, so
yeah. So thank you guys for participating in that. That's fine. So what happens is that you'll see that happening with foster children. They will tell you at the most random times the most incredible pieces of information, and you'll be. No, it can't be. And it'll be true. You know, it could be really crazy. I mean, there's all kinds of stories. We don't have to get. You guys have heard the stories. Or there will be things that they don't even, that are not even, they're just mundane. And then those will be false because you'll find a lot of times the children are kind of walking in a fantasy realm and they're trying to create information in some gaps that they have in their history. And so they'll just plug something in and you just go with it. So I encourage you that when you hear something outrageous or something that might be helpful, you don't have to try and, berate them and say, is that true? Is it really true? No, just document it. It might be helpful for the caseworker to know later. So let me ask you a question. So exclude Mr. Clark for 1 second. In 1 sentence, tell me a reason why you, Crystal, would be a great foster parent.
Because I was a previous foster child and I feel like I could relate and use some of those feelings that I experienced to relate to the child. And obviously the information that I'll learn in my trainings.
Wow, that's a very good point. So you have valuable experience. You would be able to relate. So what do you think would be a challenge for you as a foster parent?
Incorporating my household rules and perhaps beliefs into the child life. Yeah,
and that's actually something that we're going to get into. So very good point. Thank you. Okay, Miss Maria, why do you think you would be a good foster mom?
because I work in the mental field,
Oh, yeah.
and I learned a lot of the needs for these kids.
Right.
So I
Okay.
think that will help me to be a good foster parent.
Yeah, so it's really good. You have experience with things that children are facing that maybe people don't know how to put a name to, and you can be sensitive to those areas. That's good. So, what do you think might be a challenge?
I would say not having the experience to work with them directly.
Yeah. So it'll still be kind of brand new for you.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And Mr. Claude, what do you think is a way that you would be able to contribute to a foster child's life?
Because of my ministerial background and working with children and being a parent myself, and working with students for so many years, so have given me, experience and strength and to work with foster kids. Yeah.
No, that's a very good point. Yeah. So what do you think might be difficult for you as a foster parent?
This part of your experience is always because it's case by case, so it's always gonna be challenging. Like she says, adapting the kids to in general to everything in your household. You know?
Yes, and that's a very important point. Once again, we'll go over that, and I'll give you a personal example for my husband and I. One of the reasons we jumped into foster care was that we heard the governor and his wife of the state we lived in previously, pretty much just beseeching everyone in the community to please help. That there was an emergency shortage of foster families, and even more than before, they were having to split sibling groups. And so that broke our hearts. And we had an extra bedroom, and we grew up having extra people in the house. So it was a good connection, and we just kind of jumped into it. We said, absolutely not. These kids need a place where they can stay together. The challenge for us that we were thinking, and actually this is what had us wait a long amount of time before we jumped into it, was that we were thinking, okay, we have very small boys. We don't know if we'll be able to handle someone with sexual issues or a violent past. And that was one of the things that we had to really decide if it was, worth the risk, or what could we do to protect our children. So that's good. It's good for me to hear what is motivating you to get this information. So, one thing that families find difficult, and you can also follow along with the PowerPoint on the screen. One of the things that families find difficult is communicating that they don't want to do something. When you jump into foster care, and that social worker is going to call you, and they're going to want some kind of service that you can provide for them or the child. And sometimes there's going to be a time where you're thinking, I'm just not comfortable with that. But then what a lot of foster families are saying is that there's that dilemma, like, I don't want to be perceived as uncooperative. I don't want people to think that I'm being spoiled. I know that these kids need something urgent, but this is something that I don't feel comfortable with. So a lot of times what we as foster parents do, we'll just do it anyway, and we don't feel good about it, or it doesn't turn out right. Sometimes we need to be flexible, definitely, but there are times when we need to know ahead of time what our boundaries are. I had a couple of examples here. Well, in the PowerPoint, you can see it says, have a plan. Basically what that means is you and your spouse, or you all have spouses? Okay. You and your spouse need to recognize, if this happens, honey, what do you want us to do about it? Have that already set in place. List your household rules, write it out. For my husband and I, our household rules included, basically it was no phones. We had teenagers, and as much as we could get away without their parents putting the phone in our house, we did that. So it was no phones. It was come in before it gets dark. It was no smoking, at least around the property. Those kind of things that they might take for granted, write them down. So it's communicated ahead of time, and then they can't say, you didn't tell me. There's scenarios in your training folder that I want you to look at maybe at a later time that you can discuss with your family and say, family, how do we feel about this particular situation? How do we want to deal with it? But make sure that you and your spouse are always in agreement about your boundaries. And I put here, children know how to divide and conquer. You don't have to be foster children to know how to manipulate parents. All kids have learned how to do that in some way. So don't let your marriage suffer because you haven't already come into agreement on something. And then here, this is something really important right here. Don't be afraid that they're going to threaten to take the child out of your home. And that's really what the kicker is for families, is that, they don't want people to think that they are not trying everything they can. But sometimes that ultimatum might be given. Well, we're going to have to move or you won't get your check, And you have to be able to say there's some deal breakers where, I'm sorry, do what you have to do. Don't be afraid. I give you permission to not be afraid that you're going to lose that child. Because sometimes they'll say, oh, well, you know what? She wasn't bluffing. I guess we'll work it out then. Yeah. So there was a couple of situations I wanted to tell you about. One, there was a child that my husband and I had, and she came into care with us, and she was going to have to switch schools because we weren't in her district. And they told me that because she had developed such great relationships at school, that I need to take her. Now, in our state, transportation and that kind of thing were not included in your per diem, so basically that would be, I have to figure it out on my own. So, I took her a few days, maybe probably a couple of weeks, to her other school, and I had an infant at that time, plus a preschooler and a toddler, I think, something like that. And so I'd have to wake them up at 6 something to go drop her off at the school where she had all these great relationships. And so after a while, I say, you know what, I can't do it anymore. I'm done for the day after I drop her off. And she, So I told them, if you want her to go to the school, you're going to have to find a way to get her there. And I was just like the most horrible person in the world. But I realized that was not suiting my family. And they did say, well, if we find another foster family in her district, then we'll probably have to go ahead and move her. I said, okay, that might be best. And lo and behold, the next day they had a driver. So you just have to define what your boundary is. If you're okay with that, then great. The more you can do, the better it is. But know your deal breakers. There was a request from a family, from a biological mother for the foster family of this child, and they wanted to know exactly what that family was spending their per diem on for that child every month. They want to see what was coming in and what they were spending it on. My response is none of your business. Show me what you were spending your money on when you had the child. So their defense was that, well, I'm not going to get my child's hair done during visitation. I'm not going to buy my child clothes because that money has been given to you as a foster parent. Now, as a foster parent, you do whatever you need to do with that money. You're taking care of a child. That's another thing I want you to not be afraid to point out, that the money you're giving, it's still volunteer work. It's not an hourly rate. You have the right to do with it the way that you see fit. So you need to know, so that family had to sit and discuss, is this a boundary for us? Do we really want to, show the mom that, okay, we're spending money on this and this and this, or do we think that's none of her business right now? So they had to define that. And ultimately they said, no, that's not her business. But, you guys might feel differently. You might feel like it's okay. Any questions so far? Okay. Another thing that happened with our husband and I is that we had to redefine as time went on how the seasons have changed in our house and what things were going to be different. So we had a lot of teenage girls, and it came time for them to, be on the phones against our wishes. And then, like I said, what happens is the family brings in the phones, and the phones come in the house, and all of a sudden they're not cute and sweet no more. They want to be isolated in their room. They want to plan stuff. They're just totally loss of focus. Not doing their chores, not doing their homework. So that became a deal breaker for us as well. If you're not going to integrate yourself into the family, you're just going to be with a phone and your behaviors are going in a way that they shouldn't, then we need to figure something else out. Again, that's just something that you would need to define for yourself. So what I want you to do is look at the sheet that's titled Inventory of Our Family's Values and Boundaries. And I put on there a few scenarios that, again, you can look at later and maybe discuss it with your spouse. But on the second part of it, turn to the next page. There's a few blank lines where I want you to write down maybe one thing that is a deal breaker for you. A boundary you don't want to be crossed, or a value or a principle for you that, the caseworkers and the foster children need to understand. This is a deal breaker. Mr. Claw, are you thinking of yours? What's a deal breaker for you as a foster parent? That's what we want to share. While you guys are writing, there was another family that I had through work, and they have multiple children through the system, and these children all have services to help them, therapists and behavior specialists and all that kind of thing. And so this family began to say, you know what, I know this is supposed to help them, but we have no time as a family. So I had to show them how beneficial it is to communicate, this is our boundary. Everybody's services comes on one day, and you need to be out before dinner. If you can't get it done then, get it done at school. And so that helped them preserve that family unit, because the kids weren't all over the place with different providers and feeling kind of embarrassed that everybody in the neighborhood sees these cars come in for them. So that was a boundary for them. Okay, if someone has something already that you can share.
I have invading others' privacy.
Oh, what do you mean by that?
Some kids, they don't knock on the door before you go in.
Yeah.
Or going in someone's purses without
asking. Yeah. That's a very good point. Yeah, I like that.
I'd rather not have kids with family because I don't want to do the visitations.
Oh, the visitation.
Deal with the drama that may come with the family. I'd rather have kids that are just completely neglected. We don't want this child.
So there's already been termination of parental rights?
Yes.
Okay.
That's my
No, that's a very good thing to communicate. Yeah.
To the social worker.
Mm-hmm.
Wait,
yeah.
Did I answer the question right?
No, it's good.
Okay.
You're saying that you don't have the time or energy, basically, or the interest in trying to reunite them with their family. You want the ones that have already looking for permanency.
Right.
And you want to make sure that it's a good boundary, because if they still have visitation, that's going to be pressure on you to get those things done. So you're letting them know up front, that's not the area I want to be in. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Mr. Klein?
So is it no phone?
No phone.
And then a little bit selfish, but great sports involvement. My household.
Yes.
We believe every child on this planet
needs a sport.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's good. Activity would be really good for kids that definitely need to get their mind off of something, be a part of something bigger than themselves. That's a very good point. I like it.
We have done that. pretty much 100%, and we have seen the benefit of it.
And it works for the kids.
That's
yeah.
true.
Yeah.
I just put
See
Raphael
that.
in karate, and
Yeah.
he wasn't in nothing for about a year. And he said, "I feel great, Mom." I'm like, really?
Feel great.
It's good for them.
It
good
just
for
felt
them.
like you said a part of something.
Yeah.
And even in my own household, I was like, okay.
Yeah. No, it's good. You
Yeah.
have a coach or an instructor that's reinforcing what you're telling them at home.
Yeah.
So another person can be the bad guy, the disciplinarian. That's great. So the next thing we're going to talk about is communication. And in that, we'll also deal with communicating discipline as well. I have here, the right communication will save you. We know that wars have been fought for miscommunication, right? One thing you want to do is give options for your child on what they should call you, how they should address you. A lot of children don't really want to call you mom or whatever, and absolutely not. We don't want to enforce that. But some kids, they need that, and they'll tell you, and so you got to decide if that's okay with you. The most common I have is Ms. or Mr. and then their first name. But again, some kids don't want to look separated from the biological kids in the home, Or I've had kids that wanted to call me auntie, so that helps. Show your child the when, where, and how of whatever they're allowed to access. So already have a plan for that. Yes, you can get snacks anytime, or no, you can't. But you can get them here and here at this time. So brainstorm, with your family, what is okay for that child to access, when it's okay, where it's okay, okay? Okay?
I like that.
Yeah? Okay. And here's something else that some foster parents don't really know how to handle. Modeling respect and empathy for their biological family. Even when the circumstances seem so severe. Even in your mind when you're thinking, this mom or dad needs to be locked up, they need to never see the kid again. There's a process that has to happen to get to that. And that kid still identifies with their relative. And so we want to make sure that we model respect for the family. One thing that I've heard a mom say, is, don't worry. I'm not trying to take you away from your mom. I'm just here to help her until she can get better, because we moms have to stick together. And I would hear that often. We moms have to stick together. And I think that helped the child to understand that there's no pressure if you like this foster mom. She's not trying to take you away. And then here's something really important. I see this in my work a lot, where foster parents will kind of verbally separate their biological kids from their foster kids with statements like, well, my own kids don't do that. Or, I have to go pick up my daughter, but the foster daughter is not ready yet. And so if they're in the room, it kind of does something to them. So it's something we have to practice, actually. We have to practice saying, whatever key phrase you want to use to refer to all of them. And I have here, not every child wants to all of a sudden belong to another mom, but we should find a way to respect his identity while still communicating he's important to this family. So, any questions so far? I wanted to discuss discipline. So, let's say you came up on a situation where your little one that has just moved in has been hoarding food even after you've told them, don't take food upstairs. There's a snack time at this time and that time. Yeah. How would you communicate discipline or consequence? What are some ideas you might have for discipline?
Point system?
A point system, I like that. Yeah.
Or stars, like you can earn stars.
Yes. I got a star chart.
Yeah.
And maybe heading towards an incentive.
An incentive or disciplinary action.
Or consequence. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, anybody else have an idea of how to handle this one? Because you also have to have a plan of how you're going to communicate that this child is going to receive some kind of disciplinary action that might be different from how you deal with your other kids. You know, and the kids see that. Your kids see that. It's not fair that, you know, I had to be grounded and he just got talked to. You know, so you got to find a middle ground to where your kids are not gonna, your biological kids are not gonna rebel because it's not fair. Anybody else have a way that they communicate discipline? Well, I want to offer you a strategy. One of the most effective ways that I've seen to handle a child that's had some behavior concerns is to act like it is, act like you're still on their side. That you are not taking it personally, you are not freaking out. Because if it was your own biological kid, you would have been on them, you would have been all over them, and the world would have ended if they had done something like cuss out the teacher at school. So this kid comes in, they've cussed out the teacher at school and threw something at the teacher. They're in big trouble at school, so they're already receiving a consequence. So your perspective would be more like, well, honey, it seems like you've been getting in trouble a lot at school early in the morning, and maybe we're just not putting you to bed on time, and we need to make sure you get plenty of rest so you're not so cranky because you're such a cool kid, you know? And so they're receiving the consequence, but they're also not feeling defensive about it because you're on their side. I want to help you, giving you some more sleep, you know? Or maybe we don't need to go out to Chuck E. Cheese tonight because you seem really tired. You've been so cranky at school, you know? So something like that. Come at it like you guys are buddies, you know? You get your consequence, but I'm here for you. Yeah, so that has been more effective in having the child trust you and respect what you are telling them because you're balancing it out with the loving things. So
Makes sense.
yeah, I like that
right
one.
now.
Yeah. It takes the pressure off, it really does. Some foster children choose to discuss the consequence later. So they've gotten in trouble, they're gonna let it go for a couple of days because that child is used to getting in trouble. And so the defense is already up. They already got something worked out. You know, what? You gonna come at me too? You let it go. And then the day after tomorrow, you say, okay, let's sit down and talk about this. You know, where was this coming from? All right, so you got a couple of choices. Do you want to have an earlier bedtime or do you want to do without your desserts? Something, you know, where that wall is down. So that is, that would be important to implement. The other phase of communication that I want to discuss was your communication with the professionals, the social worker, the therapist, the school staff. And basically, when I say here, the right communication will save you, that's because you're going to cover your bases, okay? Cover your butts, like they say. It's almost guaranteed that there's going to be a situation that they're going to need to know from you what happened when, and you're not going to remember. You know, a rite of passage almost is for every foster family to be called on by CPS. You know, the kid is mad because you didn't let them play their video games, so they're going to go to school and tell the counselor, she doesn't love me, she beat me, you know, and they have to investigate. It's a rite of passage. When you get that note on your door from Child Protective Services, you're not the only one. So always document your communication with caseworkers. Caseworkers are extremely busy and stressed out for the most part. So when you want to communicate something, type it up in an email. It's date and time stamped. When you need to take that problem to the next level to the supervisor, you can CC. Look, I have already sent this communication 2 weeks ago. Always document. When you have an observation or just a conversation with that kid, go to your little journal at night and write down what you've heard. And again, when CPS comes at your door and they want to see, hey, are you actually abusing or neglecting this kid? Be in a position where you already have a history of what you've done for the child. Because it's a little worse if you're having to explain yourself. Be in a position where you don't have to explain yourself with words, that your actions are already there. Oh, here's the movie tickets, on her birthday. Then we went to go see the movie she wanted to see, Or here's us taking a selfie because we're reading a book in bed together because that's our special time. So no, she's not neglected. Here's her cooking her favorite meal. So build up those experiences and document them. Mr. Claude, do you have any example of why communication needs to be on point? Have you had an experience?
Oh yeah, of course.